The first time he saw our son, he didn't recognize him. That was the moment I knew I had already won. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed closure, but because the man who once walked away so easily was now standing in front of everything he lost, and he didn't even realize it yet. He stood there, frozen, his eyes moving from me to the boy beside me, searching for something familiar, something that could connect him to this moment. But there was nothing for him to hold on to. No memories, no presence, just distance. 6 years of it, standing silently between him and the child who carried his name without ever knowing his voice. Is he mine? He asked, his voice barely steady, like the words themselves were too heavy for him to carry. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, the same way time had stretched when he left me alone, pregnant and afraid. The same way nights had stretched when I waited for a message that never came. Silence has a way of speaking louder than anything else. I looked at him carefully, studying the man who once promised me everything and delivered nothing. He looked older, not just in appearance but in presence, like life had taken something from him, piece by piece. But none of that mattered to me anymore, because the version of me he left behind no longer existed. You don't get to ask that question, I said finally, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through whatever hope he had left. His eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by something he clearly wasn't expecting. Resistance, strength, distance. He used to think I would always be soft, always waiting, always willing to forgive. But that woman disappeared the moment he walked out the door. My son shifted slightly beside me, looking up with quiet curiosity. "Mom, who is he?" he asked, his voice innocent, untouched by the weight of the moment. That question hit harder than anything else, because there was no simple answer, no easy explanation for a man who chose absence over responsibility. I placed my hand gently on my son's shoulder, keeping him close, grounding both of us in the present. "He's someone who made a choice," I said quietly, and that truth landed exactly where it needed to, not just for my son, but for the man standing in front of us, finally beginning to understand the cost of what he walked away from. He took a small step forward, hesitation written all over him. "I didn't know," he said quickly, almost desperately. "I swear, I didn't know." But ignorance doesn't erase abandonment, and regret doesn't rewrite history. I almost smiled, because for the first time in 6 years, he was the one standing there, unsure, and I was the one in control. There was a time when I believed he would never leave me, back when his presence felt permanent, like something solid I could rely on no matter what life threw at us. He used to look at me like I was everything, like there was no world beyond us, and I believed it, completely, without question. That kind of belief doesn't come from logic. It comes from trust, the kind that makes you feel safe enough to stop preparing for loss. We met in a way that felt simple but meaningful. No sudden sparks or dramatic moments, just two people slowly building something real. He listened when I spoke. He remembered the little things. He made ordinary days feel lighter, and over time, that consistency turned into something deeper, something I thought couldn't break. He used to say he would always be there, no matter what, and I held on to those words like they were promises written in stone. When we got married, I thought that was the beginning of everything we had planned. We didn't have much, but we had direction. We talked about the future like it was already waiting for us. A home, stability, a family. He spoke about children like it was something he was ready for, something he wanted just as much as I did. And I trusted that vision, because it felt shared, it felt certain. But things don't always fall apart all at once. Sometimes they shift so slowly you don't realize what's happening until it's already gone. He started coming home later. Conversations became shorter. The warmth in his voice faded into something distant. I told myself it was stress, that he was overwhelmed, because accepting that something was wrong felt harder than pretending everything was fine. Then came the tension. Small disagreements that turned into arguments without clear reasons. He started pointing out things about me that had never been an issue before, saying I was too emotional, too demanding, too much. And without realizing it, I began changing myself to keep him from pulling further away. I gave up pieces of who I was, thinking it would bring him back. It didn't. That night, I tried to call him, again and again, each time hoping he would answer, hoping there had been some kind of misunderstanding, something we could still fix. But the phone just kept ringing until it didn't anymore. Silence replaced everything. The kind of silence that feels heavier than words. The kind that tells you the truth without saying it. The next morning, I tried again. This time, it didn't even ring, straight to nothing. That was the moment I understood. He didn't just leave, he erased me, blocked me out of his life like I never existed, like everything we had built meant nothing. And now, I was left carrying something he would never even know about. I sat on the floor for hours, the test still in my hand. My future felt unfamiliar, like I had been pushed into a life I wasn't ready for. I wasn't just alone anymore. I was responsible for someone else, someone who didn't ask for any of this, and I had no idea how I was going to survive it. The days that followed were unbearable. Every moment felt heavier than the last. Doctor visits alone, nights that stretched longer than they should, thoughts that wouldn't stop circling in my mind. I kept thinking he would come back, that he would realize what he had done, that he would show up. But he never did. People started asking questions. Where is he? Why are you alone? And I learned very quickly how uncomfortable the truth made others, so I stopped telling it. I smiled when I needed to, lied when I had to, because explaining abandonment is exhausting, and most people don't really want to understand it anyway. But the worst part wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even the fear. It was the betrayal, the realization that the person I trusted the most chose to leave at the exact moment I needed him the most. That kind of pain doesn't fade. It stays. It changes you. Months passed, and I stopped expecting anything from him. I stopped checking my phone, stopped hoping, because hope had only made things worse. And slowly, something inside me shifted. I wasn't the same person anymore. I couldn't be. The day my child was born, I held him in my arms and realized something. I had survived everything he thought would break me, and in that moment, I made a silent promise. I would never let him forget what he lost, even if he didn't know it yet. Years passed, and I never told my son the truth about his father. Not because I wanted to protect that man, but because I wanted control. Control over when the truth would come out, and how deeply it would affect him. I wasn't interested in quick closure. I was interested in timing, in making sure that when the past returned, it wouldn't just be remembered, it would be felt. I built my life slowly, without help, without support, without anyone standing beside me. Every decision carried weight, every mistake cost more than it should have, but I didn't stop. I couldn't, because failure was never an option anymore. I had someone depending on me, and that responsibility changed everything about how I moved through the world. I worked harder than I ever had before, learned things I never thought I would need, took opportunities that scared me, failed, adjusted, and kept going. And over time, something shifted. Not just around me, but inside me. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building something stable, something strong, something that didn't depend on anyone else. My son grew up watching all of it, watching me struggle, then rise, then stand stronger than before. And he became something I didn't expect, but desperately needed. Calm, kind, a reflection of everything I had fought to protect. He didn't ask about his father often, but when he did, I gave him simple answers, controlled answers, because the full truth wasn't meant for him yet. There were moments I thought about reaching out, ending the silence, telling him everything, but every time that thought appeared, so did the memory of that night, the way he left, the way he didn't look back, the way he chose freedom without hesitation. And I reminded myself that this wasn't about him anymore. It was about consequence. Then one day, without warning, the past found its way back to me. I saw his name somewhere unexpected, just a small detail, something most people would ignore. But for me, it felt like everything paused. Years of silence suddenly broken by a single moment. I didn't react immediately. I didn't rush. I observed, quietly, carefully. I learned what I could without being seen, where he was, what he was doing, what his life looked like now. And the truth was, different than I imagined. He wasn't successful. He wasn't stable. He wasn't even happy. His life looked like something unfinished, like someone constantly searching but never finding, relationships that didn't last, work that didn't hold, a direction that never stayed consistent. It was like he had been running ever since he left, but never arrived anywhere. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel pain when I thought about him. I felt something else, something colder. Not satisfaction, not yet, because this wasn't enough. Struggle wasn't the lesson he needed. Understanding was. And I realized something in that moment. Time had finally aligned everything perfectly. He was exactly where he needed to be, and so was I. I didn't move fast. I didn't act on impulse. I waited, because what was coming next had to be perfect. The day our paths crossed again, he thought it was coincidence. For him, it was just another ordinary moment. Another day in a life that never quite settled. But for me, it was something else entirely. It was timing, carefully chosen, carefully controlled, because I had already seen this moment coming long before it happened. He looked different, not just older, but worn down in a way that time alone doesn't explain. There was hesitation in how he moved, uncertainty in his eyes, and something deeper that I recognized instantly. Regret, the kind that doesn't come from one mistake, but from realizing too late what that mistake cost. When he saw me, he froze, like he wasn't sure I was real, like I belonged to a version of his life that no longer existed. And for a second, I saw it clearly. The confusion, the disbelief, the question forming in his mind before he even spoke. "Is it really you?" he asked. I nodded. Nothing more. No emotion, no warmth, just acknowledgement. And that unsettled him more than anything I could have said, because he expected something. Anger, pain, maybe even relief, but I gave him nothing. We spoke, but it wasn't a conversation. It was him trying to fill silence I refused to break. He asked where I had been, what I had been doing, how life had turned out for me, and I answered just enough to keep him listening, just enough to make him curious, but never enough to satisfy him. Then his eyes shifted. He saw my son, standing just a few steps away, calm, steady, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. And I watched the exact moment something changed inside him. It wasn't full understanding yet, but it was enough to start breaking whatever illusion he had been holding on to. "Who is he?" he asked. The question hung there, heavy and dangerous, exactly where I wanted it. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, let it settle into him the same way the truth eventually would. "He's mine," I said. His expression tightened. Confusion turned into realization, slowly, painfully. "Yours," he repeated, like he needed to hear it again to understand it. And then I saw it, the moment it started connecting in his mind. I stepped closer, just enough. "You left," I said calmly. No questions, no explanation, no responsibility. His breathing changed, shallow, uneven. "I found out 3 days later," I continued. His eyes widened. 3 days after you chose to disappear, I found out I was pregnant." Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a space, but crushes everything inside it. He stepped back like the truth physically hit him, like his body reacted before his mind could catch up. "No, that's not possible," he whispered. But it was, and he knew it. Because reality doesn't need approval. It just exists. And in that moment, everything he thought he had escaped came back all at once. Stronger, heavier, unavoidable. I looked at him one last time. "You didn't just leave me," I said quietly. "You left him too." And that was the moment he finally understood. He stood there, completely still, like the world had just shifted beneath him. I watched his face carefully, every emotion passing through it without control. Shock, confusion, regret, and then something deeper, something heavier. The realization that this wasn't a moment he could escape from. This wasn't something he could undo or explain away. This was the consequence he never prepared for. "I didn't know," he said, his voice barely holding together. It sounded weak, not because the words were wrong, but because they came too late. Years too late.
and I had already lived through everything his absence created. Every night, every decision, every moment where I had to become stronger because I had no other choice. "You didn't ask," I replied. That was the truth he couldn't fight. He didn't check, didn't look back, didn't wonder if I was okay. He chose to disappear, and with that choice, he gave up the right to know what came after. And now, standing in front of it, he wanted understanding. He looked at my son again, really looked this time, trying to memorize a face he should have known years ago. There was something desperate in his expression now, something that almost looked like hope. "Can I talk to him?" he asked quietly.
I didn't answer right away. I let the silence settle again, because silence had always been the loudest part of this story. It was what he left me with, and now it was what he had to sit inside. Then I shook my head, not harshly, not angrily, just firmly. "He has a life," I said. "A complete one." He swallowed hard, because he understood what I meant, that life didn't include him. Not because I took it away, but because he chose to walk away from it before it even began. Tears filled his eyes, but I didn't feel anything in response. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet sense of balance, like everything had finally aligned the way it was supposed to. "I'm sorry," he said, "but apologies don't rebuild years. They don't erase absence, and they don't rewrite choices." I took my son's hand gently. He looked up at me, calm and trusting, completely unaware of the weight behind us. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This was never about revenge. It was about becoming someone he could never reach again. We started walking forward, without hesitation, without looking back. "Who was that?" my son asked softly. I smiled, brushing his hair away from his face. "Someone who made a mistake," I said. He nodded, accepting it simply, because children don't need complicated truths. They need stability, and I had given him that. Behind me, I could feel it, the silence, the weight, the regret he would carry long after this moment ended. But I didn't turn around, because some endings don't need to be seen. They just need to be left behind. And as we walked further away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because he suffered, but because I didn't anymore. The woman he abandoned no longer existed. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.